very much. First of all, thank you for having me tonight. Somebody has said that I have a voice like 7 miles of gravel road, so you have to put up with that. But we have some important things to talk about tonight. Before we get into them, I want to just say that I've lived here since 1991. This is my first speech. So at this torrid pace, my next speech will be 2035. My subject matter will be like begins at 100, and I hope to see you all there. One of the things I've learned about meetings, and I hope that that is how you see this tonight, a chance for us to talk together rather than have someone lecture or speechify, is that the payment for people who take the trouble to come is they leave with something they may not have known before. And the stuff that you're going to learn about tonight is my latest work and stuff that's totally current. So to start things off, I'm going to give you a little bit of a sample of some of the people who have been interviewed for my new book, Harper Unbound is the working title. It's not finalized yet. But it is probably, despite some of the books I've been involved in, the most important book ever. And it came at a time in my life when I didn't expect to be writing it. Penguin came to me and they said, listen, somebody's got to do this book. Lawrence Martin did Harperland. It took it up to the majority government. And of course, the burning issue is this. Did we see the real Stephen Harper from 2006 to 2011 when he had minority governments and faced losing the government on every major issue? My feeling is we did not. And a lot of people felt comforted by the fact that Stephen Harper's so-called secret or private agenda wasn't real because they didn't see it between 2006 and 2011. Well, I think it is there. And I think what you saw was political prudence. And that's all. A man who couldn't take the chance. He almost lost his government over taking the public funding of political parties off the map as a minority government. And he learned his lesson. He hasn't tried anything like that since. But now that he has the majority, we get a chance to see what sort of a person he is and what sort of a philosophy he stands for. And it has nothing to do with his Accountability Act or any of the other nice-sounding pieces of legislation that he gives good names to, but doesn't observe in practice, at least in my view. But we're going to start out. Eddie Greenspan, probably the most famous criminal lawyer in Canada, was one of the people I talked to at the very beginning because the Harper government's law and order regime and legislation has been dissed by judges, by the Canadian Bar Association, by people who are running justice systems in the province. And the government isn't listening to any of the people who work in the field. This is what Eddie Greenspan had to say. General comment about Stephen Harper in the interview that I recently did with him. I can tell you this, 20 years from now, we will have to dismantle all of this harsh and cynical stuff that he has done. I am not predicting this, Michael. I'm not saying that this will happen. It will surely happen. And that is something I've heard from a lot of people, is that the damage that's been done to our, especially our democratic institutions, but a whole range of other things, a lot of people are worried that the next government that comes in will have a great deal of difficulty putting Humpty Dumpty together again. This is Kevin Page, one of my favorite people. Kevin Page, of course, as you all know, is the Parliamentary budget officer. His position was created by the Accountability Act. He was created and hired by the Harper government, and they have done their best ever since to run him out of town, and now have finally managed to do that. But I'm sure everybody in this room remembers that incredible announcement from Davos, Switzerland, where the Prime Minister of Canada announced that the old age supplement was changing. It was not announced in Parliament, there was no debate. And this is what Kevin Page said. The decision to change the OAS blew us away. The announcement was made without a white paper and without analysis. The Department of Finance had no numbers. I would add one other thing to Kevin's thoughts, and that is that Prime Minister Harper, while running, said he would never touch the pension system. So we have a promise broken, but we have the imposition of a fundamental change that affects everybody without any debate in the country. In fact, it's announced in a foreign country. Now, Sheila Fraser had to come over to my apartment to do the interview in Ottawa, because she said if she was seen with me in public, she would surely be in trouble. So we conducted the interview. It's funny, she took her glasses at one point. She said, "Would you like me to give you my tough Auditor General look?" And she peered at me. So I got a good laugh out of Sheila. But she is perhaps the most worried of all of the parliamentary officers I talked to. She understands the system. And she was the most popular Canadian public figure for her time as Auditor General because she was honest. And she spoke truth to power. And this is what she said to me for the book. Parliament has become so undermined, it is unable to do the job that people expect of it. A glaring example of this is the budget bill, where there was no thoughtful detail and absolutely no scrutiny of a bill that contained 70 pieces of legislation. That goes to basic democracy. Now this next person that I'm going to tell you about is our former ambassador to the United Nations. His name is Paul Heinbecker. He is responsible for keeping Canada out of the Iraq War. There were 3 people in the room when that decision was taken. One of them was Eddie Goldenberg, the other was Jean Chrétien, and the third was this man that I interviewed, Paul Heinbecker. And Heinbecker made the case it was a gigantic mistake to become involved in that war. He is a classic career diplomat. He believes in diplomacy. He does not believe in an expanded Canadian military. He thinks that we need a smaller foreign policy, not a larger military. So that's where he comes from. He's walked the walk and fought with all the tough guys who take a different view, especially at the United Nations, the Americans especially. But this is what he had to say on the subject of, are the Conservatives good stewards of the economy? Do they manage things well? Because that, of course, is the first and last thing they say in their defense. We are better stewards of the economy. I have a few thoughts on that, but first, listen to what Paul Heinbecker said. This guy was a career diplomat for 30 years, talking about the G8 and the G20. I have been around a lot of summits. I've never been to any that came within $900 million of Canada's G8 and G20. Nicolas Sarkozy left Canada and laughingly observed as he was leaving when he saw the bill. He said, "I can tell you we're going to be hosting the same group, and it's going to be $85 million. And we care every bit as much about security as you do." So we spent almost $1 billion on those 2 meetings. And those same 2 meetings also gave us the example of how Stephen Harper treats people like Tony Clement, who misappropriated $50 million from the Canada Border Service Agency to build gazebos in Muskoka in its riding. And there was no legislation to justify that money. Later, the Conservatives said they didn't have time to pass a bill, so they just took the money. That's not how a parliamentary democracy works. In fact, that's how a junta works. They take what they want, they do what they want, they say what they like. So here's a guy saying $900 million. For those people who remember the ad sponsorship scandal, the number is $250 to $300 million. That was funneled through Crown corporations and funneled to liberal-friendly sources. A high number, and an unacceptable one. And they paid the price. Paul Martin did, for sure. If you take a look at what has happened most recently, the Harper government has misplaced $3.1 billion. They have said, don't worry, it's not misspent, it's just missing. I don't know about you, but if my banker said that, I would take great comfort in it.